Well, hello again. Here's a good one. Is Trump a flight risk? I'll deal with the yes or no aspects of this shortly. Well, what a crazy situation to be in, to be asking the question whether the President of the United States is a flight risk. But I must say there's quite a bit of chatter going on now on the internet about this and kind of ranking countries and all of that. Oh, dear. But anyway, look, you might say, hey, it isn't even over yet. The lawsuits are coming. Forget about all that. That's all just what Trump does. He's a scrapper. He's grown up in the rough and tumble of the New York City real estate property market. He sues, he defies, he shouts, he bangs the table. That's what he does. And these frivolous, as we say in Britain, vexatious lawsuits are just all part of the drill. He's lost the election. Joe Biden is the president-elect, just as simple as that. So he is stuck with the fact that he is now the loser. And one can kind of sense that he's feeling that as you see clips of him since the defeat was announced and on his way back from the golf course and so forth. He does unsurprisingly look like a defeated person. But as we all know, he has an avalanche of civil and criminal legal action confronting him as soon as he steps out of the White House. By the way, some would say, oh, supposing he refuses to leave, sort of like some of us here in Britain remember that the Queen Mother didn't want to leave and insisted on staying in Buckingham Palace even after her daughter, the present Queen, was crowned. She finally got kicked out. And the same thing would happen to Trump if he refused to leave. Federal marshals would go in and just carry him out. Oh, dear me. What a situation. What a crazy situation. Okay, let's deal with the issues. What are some of the reasons why Trump is a flight risk? Well, as I alluded to before, there are many legal and financial problems facing him. I did see an analysis of this, so I guess it's no real secret. A list of all of his major properties, the amount of money he's borrowed from them, the amount of money that's coming due shortly that he has to pay back, or installments that he has to pay, or whatever the collateral he has against them. And it's not a pretty sight. He, by some accounts, has I don't know, hundreds of millions of dollars anyway that he has to come up with in the next couple of years. So that's going to be tough. Some would say he simply can't manage it. Now, of course, the Trump reaction to that will be, I'll cut a deal, and one way or another, I'll face that. But he's been through that before. That's not a reason why he's a flight risk. The real reason are his legal problems. There are some federal problems facing him, and some people say that he could pardon himself before he leaves office. There's quite a legal dispute about whether a president can pardon himself or not, and as someone said, it probably would depend on which judge heard the complaint. But be that as it may, the federal difficulties that he has are really not his biggest problem. The biggest problems are New York City and state, and there's a lot of proceeding against him of a civil and criminal sort, both having to do with his companies, his taxes, his apparently fraudulent statements in his books of account, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot there. And the New York District Attorney, Cyrus Vance Jr., I think he's probably the son or something of the previous Secretary of State, Cyrus Vance, apparently is determined to get him. So, so this has been going on for a while. They're all, they're salivating in New York, waiting for him to get out of office, and then the war starts in the courts. So that's a huge problem. And his legal advice may be you're going to lose on some of these, and that could mean time inside, being sent to Rikers Island, a hellhole if there ever was one. Wow, what a come down that would be, not only for the President of the United States, but one of the biggest property operators in New York City. So, wow, that's a real reason to consider him a flight risk. Number two, I was reading an analysis by a military heavyweight kind of scenario expert in the U.S. I think he's a senior Army officer whose business had been to talk through different scenarios and theaters of operations and planning for them and so forth. And his conclusion is Trump is a number one flight risk. He absolutely meets all the requirements. He's in a lot of trouble, and there are places, we'll get to it in a minute, that would probably accept him. We should take this seriously. This isn't just a little bit of buzz on the internet. Number three, there are countries that would take him. First of all, there's a huge number of countries that do not have extradition treaties with the U.S. Now, the fact that a country doesn't have an extradition treaty with the U.S. doesn't guarantee that they wouldn't send you back anyway. It just means they're not obliged to under the terms of the treaty. And he certainly wouldn't go to a country that does have an extradition treaty with the U.S., which is basically most of Europe and the developed world, because it would be just too easy for them for the U.S. Authorities to fetch him back were he to be charged with serious crimes. But those that are on the list, with a few exceptions, are places I suspect he probably wouldn't readily think of as the first place to retire to. Most of the countries in Africa, most of the Arab world, and so forth. But there are a few possibles. One of the Gulf states, the UAE, where King Juan Carlos of Spain apparently is has departed to with the lots of money that he's stolen. China, and most of all, Russia. Now, Russia is a really plausible target for him. That may be why he's kind of cozied up to President Putin, and Russia would be logical. Putin himself is a kleptocrat, a man who's stolen loads of money. That's why he's the life president, and he and Trump would probably get along quite well. And this may well be why Trump seems to have been kind of easy on Putin during his reign and during his incumbency, and in fact even talked favorably about Putin. Maybe he was teeing this up all along. Next, he even kind of mused about leaving the country at a recent a press conference that he was involved in. When somebody asked him a tough question, he kind of threw away the comment, well, maybe I'll leave the country. That kind of suggests psychologically it may be in the back of his mind. Otherwise, why would he say it? Interesting little kind of Freudian tidbit there. And then finally, leaving the country, fleeing jurisdictions, flight risk and all this, that's what crooks do. And in many respects, I'm afraid Donald Trump, up until now, the President of the United States, is in many respects a crook. And so it would be not at all inconsistent for him to do whatever he could do to dodge the law of the land. So there it is. What a sad commentary on him, but we've got to be realistic about it. Okay, what about those who say no, he won't flee? He's not a flight risk. Well, number one, he's a big ego, to say the least. And for him to flee the country, to acknowledge that the financial and legal pressures were just too much for him, would be an admission of defeat, of weakness, something that he's just constitutionally not able to deal with. His self-image of a very rich man, a great leader, a man to make America great, and so forth, would be quite at risk from such from such a process. So he just won't do it. Secondly, who would fly the plane? I mean, if he were to be escaping jurisdiction, who were fleeing from legal action, and now, of course, he could flee before there were legal action. That would be a different matter. But if he were actually doing something illegal, he might have trouble getting anyone to go with him, and that's a pretty good reason for him, really, not to go, in that it might just not be readily possible. Furthermore, his family probably wouldn't go with him, and he wouldn't want to leave his family. Much as we sort of laugh about the fact that he never holds Melania's hand and all the rest of it, we can't know what the ties in that family are. If any of these books about the Trump family are true, there do seem to be pretty nasty, bunch of vipers and all of that. But who knows? We can't know interpersonally how they feel about one another and how leaving one another forever would sit. It could easily be simply unacceptable to him, and another reason that he wouldn't want to go. Another quite realistic, practical reason is that he can afford, of course, very good lawyers, and in all of these cases, they simply might be able to spin it out for the rest of his life. Delaying motions, challenges, all of that kind of stuff, and it can just go on and on. Now, of course, a judge in the face of this can simply call a halt to all of that. But lawyers are good at delaying things because they get paid by the hour, and so they would be under instruction to do that, and so there he might be able to escape the long arm of the law, at least for a good little while. He doesn't look too fit and healthy to me, so maybe he doesn't have that many years left anyway. So, and finally, what I think is really a big reason why he wouldn't flee, especially to Russia, is the fact that as commander-in-chief, as president, he himself, even though one sometimes doubts this, has knowledge and insight and information about everything that America's up to and plans to do of a covert, secret military sort. He is prone to America's greatest secrets. And if Trump were to, for instance, decide on Russia as his place of final residence, which I certainly think would be one of his prime options. It certainly wouldn't be China, which is another one of the sensible countries. There aren't very many that he could reasonably know that he could escape extradition from. And that does really present a problem for him to be anywhere where he might be, for instance, inclined to trade what he knows for protection and a comfortable life. And now I think even kind of peaceful, calm, let's not get too excited, Joe Biden as president wouldn't put up with that. And my guess is that in those circumstances, if it were thought that he was in Russia doing a secrets dump, he would suddenly and mysteriously die of the American version of Novichok. I'm quite sure of that. And Trump would know that. And that's one of the reasons, I think, maybe the biggest reasons why he wouldn't even try, certainly of going to a place like that. And of course, it wouldn't do for him to go there and say, well, I'm not telling you anything. Well, then, of course, the deal might then fall apart in any case, and he could be shipped out. So there's a number of reasons why he probably won't go. Well, what's my take on all of this? Well, uh, with Trump, nothing would surprise me. A rational man, sensible man, would assess all of these risks, pros and cons, look at his options and so forth, and I'm quite sure would decide that a flight was not a good idea, not in his interest, and he might even put his life at risk, but it just basically wouldn't work. There's too much going against it. But this is not a rational man, as I said in a previous video. I think he's mentally unbalanced. So I just can't know what goes and would go on inside his head about this. But with a chap like this, anything's possible. How sad. But anyway, that's where we are. So he might have a go, but it would be a bad idea. Okay, that's it. Well, hope you enjoyed that. It's a bit controversial, I suppose, but I think it's a balanced view. Anyway, if you liked it, give me a like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, make additional suggestions, comment if you like, and I'll see you at the next one.